be smoldering without them. They break down stigmas, build up equity, and just say yes. Yes to good troublemaking. Yes to being empowered. Yes to fair access. Now more than ever, Weedmap says yes and stands with the fighters for change.
Welcome to Green Enterprise, information, education, and empowerment conversation presented by Weedmaps. I'm your moderator, Rue Johnson of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, and I'll be hosting a conversation around Weedmap's new initiative, Together for Equity, Access, and Legalization. Today, I have with me Cedric Haynes of Weedmaps and Roz McCarthy of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Hello to you both. I'd like to start.
Hi, how are you?
Really well, how are you?
Great, thank you.
Good. I'd like to start with you, Roz, and just have you give us a bit of your history and some of the motivating factors that brings you into the cannabis space as one of our leaders.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with Cedric and you, Rue, as well. My name again is Roz McCarthy. I'm the founder and the CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that I started literally 5 years ago in my living room. And I did it with the intentions of creating, I want to say, an umbrella or an opportunity for communities of color to have a safe way to get information, education, outreach, training about the cannabis industry. And I don't apologize. I really want to focus on the Black community that's been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs. When you talk about legalization of cannabis, you talk about our community. And for me, my focus on the medical side was twofold. I lost my mom to breast cancer in 2005, and my son has sickle cell. So I'm a sickle cell mom. And at the time when I started the organization, Brian was 17 years old. And I thought about the fact, the negative stigma that's around Black men who may consume cannabis, not knowing there could be a medical condition that's connected to this plant while they are consuming, made me go, who's gonna fight for my kid? Who's gonna take care of my kid? Who's gonna make sure that you don't go and put a label on my kid? And if nothing else, I'm gonna be a mama bear. You know how it goes, Rue. I'm a mama bear. This is my baby, and he's been through so much in life. And so I created M for MM as an opportunity to not only make sure my kid was protected, but make sure all communities are protected. We currently now have 27 chapters throughout the country. We have 3 international chapters, one in Toronto, one in the UK and Jamaica, and 2 HBCU chapters, one at FAMU and also at Southern University. So I'm super proud of the work we've been doing and all of our team members out, throughout the country.
Wow, that's incredible. And I think it's so inspiring to hear how that personal experience is really what allowed you to add that texture to your leadership within the cannabis space. So really inspiring. We're excited to hear more from you. Thank you, Roz. Cedric, a little background, please.
Good morning, Rue and Roz. My name is Cedric Haynes. I'm the director of emerging markets and Weedmap's government relations team. I was formerly the director of public policy and partnerships. My background is largely in federal public policy. I started with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation in 2009 through an emerging leaders program that placed me in DC working in the House of Representatives with my home Congressman, Benny Thompson. After that, I went to law school, and when I was finishing law school, I went back to work for Benny Thompson. And working for Benny Thompson and the parallels to the work that we do at Weedmaps in terms of social equity and social justice is a really interesting nexus. And honestly, why I came into the space to know him is to know that he's a champion for small, minority-owned and disadvantaged businesses, right? And just, giving voice and life to communities that are underserved and underrepresented. And specifically as it pertains to participation in the federal government's contracting processes and opportunities for students from HBCUs to be able to, understand what opportunities exist in the federal government and being able to take advantage of those opportunities. So I always say, I remember when I was transitioning out of Thompson's office and told him I was coming to work in the cannabis space, the one thing that he said to me that will always stick with me is to help somebody, because that's what we did when we were working in his office, and that's what I try and do when it comes to evaluating and monitoring cannabis marketplaces as they spring up. So my job specifically at Weed Maps is to use my public policy experience and my CSR experience to evaluate these policies as they, spring up across the nation, and then to figure out how we can use legalese language to ensure that, these marketplaces are accessible for us, they're equitable for us, and they're sustainable marketplaces in general. So I'm really happy and honored to be taking part of this conversation with you and Roz, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And I'd like for you to continue because I want to segue into how we take our talents that we've had prior to cannabis and working in the cannabis industry and how you really can apply that to this space, but then also really having that lens of, like you said, helping someone. And because there's a lot that's so new within the industry, a lot of times it's hard to really pinpoint exactly where those pain spots are, if you will. So how does your public policy background really carry over into the direction of equity within the cannabis space? And then Roz, I'll ask you the same question.
Honestly, it literally permeates everything you do. So especially being in government relations, so I'll kind of take this I'll answer it in two ways. The first is even coming into the industry in the first place, right? So when I was in DC, it was around the time that they were passing the initiative to legalize in DC, right? So I remember walking through my neighborhood, going to the train to get to work, and you would see the signs posted up about legalization come to DC. And I remember talking to my friends who were also from Mississippi living in DC and thinking to ourselves, like, this is something that we want to be involved in. Like, it's coming down the pipeline. It's a lot of, every day you turn on the news, they talking about how much money is to be made in it, this and that. And then the only things you would hear about is like, are you gonna have a dispensary? You want to own a dispensary, or you want to be a producer, or you want to be a delivery, or something like that. So, interestingly, I never really made the nexus between public policy and the cannabis marketplace until I became aware of various advocacy organizations, and then I would start to see these listings pop up looking for policy professionals to participate in this space. So it's like the whole time you're thinking to yourself, I want to be involved, so I got to have a dispensary, I got to be a license holder. But honestly, what you do now probably has some sort of interesting nexus and is needed in the cannabis space. So it's just interesting that, Weed Maps would have a government relations associate position open around the time that all of these things were happening. So I applied for it, and the rest on that is sort of history. So the one, to answer it the first way, is, when we think, and when I say we, I mean people of color, everybody who looks like me. There are a lot of opportunities out there. Not everybody's going to be a business owner. Not everybody's going to be, a manager. Everybody's not going to be able to hold a license, but I guarantee you that what you do or what you're working on, whether it be, security, you're an engineer, you working on a chemistry degree, you're interested in finance, there is some sort of nexus to what you do and how you can use it to further the cannabis industry. And then the second, more broader piece of this is the public policy aspect. Look, it's like, every time a market comes open, it is because someone has written an ordinance, the state has written a law, there are regulations being made, and all of those processes are processes that I was very familiar with from working in the federal government, right? So it's like a different, it's a different medium, if you will. Like the federal government is its own beast, and each state will have its own processes and cities and counties and so forth. But to sort of know the procedure, having been a parliamentarian in Congress and figuring out how the levers work, and then understanding public policy is not so hard to try and come up to speed and apply those concepts that you use to be successful on Capitol Hill, to be able to apply those concepts to try and have some sort of measure of success in cannabis spaces. And it's really interesting because, I think to myself, I have a friend that works in transportation, and he always says how you design your streets is how people, right? So does your community have sidewalks? Do you have first mile, last mile transportation? And what you will find is in transportation, the communities that are treated inequitably or lesser thought about overwhelmingly look a certain way. And I just think to myself, like, applying it to the cannabis space, how you design your cannabis law, how you write your program tells me who you want to participate, who you want to benefit, who you want to be able to own a business, who you want to be able to even have access in the first place. So to take all those concepts and that experience and try and roll it up, and distill what is going right and what is going wrong, and just provide that to, emerging markets as they come aboard is really rewarding. But that's really where the nexus is.
Absolutely. That's so important, taking that sort of applied principle and filling a need, which I think, Roz, you do so well with M4MM. Obviously, that didn't come about by happenstance. I would love for you to talk about what your background was prior to cannabis and how those skills have led you to build M4MM into these massive chapters and to do such great advocacy work.
Absolutely. The skill set that I acquired prior to cannabis has absolutely created the framework of how you see M4MM. I come from a corporate background. I spent 10 years with Bristol Myers Squibb I was a pharmaceutical rep. I was a division manager. I was a trainer. I got trained by the best of the Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company. Then on top of that, I spent another additional 10 years working for the largest end-of-life care hospice company as their regional director and as their senior director of marketing. And so in that role, and also in my role in the pharma industry, I ended up having individuals that reported to me. They were my reps. They were the folks that went out into the community. So I already knew, first and foremost, what I do right now is just relationships. It's customer-oriented selling. How do I interface with my customer? I know who my customer is. My customer is my community. I know what my goals I want to get accomplished. It's literally just business one-on-one that I've learned from the corporate side. I had the pleasure also, after leaving corporate America, of actually having a consulting firm. And during that time, I consulted the African American Chamber in Central Florida. I was on the board for the California Black Chamber of Commerce. I was a consultant for them. I worked with federally qualified healthcare centers writing grants. I was a grant reviewer. So if you take all of that together, along with my corporate experience, it was almost like, you ever have something where you do something and it's like in your gut, in your belly, you try to run from it, but you can't run. It's like, this is for you. This, what I'm doing right now, you guys, it's spirit driven, it's spirit led. It's not about me. It's about me making a difference and trying to help right some wrongs and help and create opportunities. It's about looking at this plant, because I come from a little country town in Oviedo, Florida, that, I grew up where we didn't, like, you don't smoke weed, I was a product of that. You go to school, you don't do drugs. So I had all those misconceptions, all that stigma that's attached to this plant. I'm a product of that. But I took the time from a medical perspective, and that's what I want to encourage our communities from a medical perspective, taking the time and looking at this plant and identifying why is it that we can see there has been a substantial difference in people's health and wellness when they're able to have a physician to direct them through their options of utilizing this plant. And I'm a witness, guys. I'm a witness. My kid currently right now, he normally gets a transfusion every 6 to 8 weeks. And we are, of course, we are right in the middle of trying to get him a match for the bone marrow transplant program. Due to he utilizes cannabis for pain management as well as for body pain management as well, and crisis pain management. And due to him utilizing it on an intermittent basis, he has not had to have a transfusion in over almost 16 weeks. So that right there, when I tell you that there's such an opportunity for us to learn, I'm not saying it's for everyone, but to learn and to understand. And going back to Cedric's point, policy is it. If y'all believe, the reason why you have a Stacey Abrams and all these other different fighters out here saying go vote is because when you put people in place that are able to help direct policy, then you have advocates like myself and like Cedric that goes and say, hey, listen, we have an unfair industry. We need you to help us to put policy in place so that when we have license holders and operators come in, if there's policy that says you have to interface with diversity business for contracting, hey, listen, our business take off. It's an economic conversation that we have to have, and policy leads the way. And so you're right on point, Cedric, with that point.
100%. I could just hear you talk this talk, honestly. I'm feeling riled up in a great way. And I want you to continue. And Cedric, I'll throw to you this as well. But, you speak about it in such an important way because it's important that we understand what's at stake, right? And so what happens, and please talk about this, if we don't enter into the cannabis space with this knowledge and information and with a lens of social equity and economic justice, what's at stake, Roz?
Absolutely. And I want to paint a picture for you. Imagine if you were incarcerated, or you're still incarcerated, or you've been incarcerated before, but maybe you're still incarcerated federally, state, and it's for possession, small possession. And you end up coming out and you end up getting released or what have you. And you come out to an industry that now has legalized this plant, that you have had your life taken, parts of your life taken away, your family's been disrupted, your life has been disrupted, you have like significant loss that you can't get back. One thing about it, guys, when time is gone, time is gone. You can't get it back. It is gone. So imagine having that person come out, and disproportionately, it has been our community that's that person. You come out to a legalized industry that now 92 to 95% is run by white men. The same white men who said, listen, this is an industry that I'm going to put you in jail for. If we do not see it's an economic conversation. Look at it from an economics. Let me share a number with you. The total impact in 2020 for the cannabis industry from a dispensary perspective has been, you got about $19 billion from a dispensary perspective. The total economic impact is almost $40 million, and $40 billion outside of just dispensary sales or what have you. What that means is this industry is having an economic impact, but how do we make sure that that impact is also going to hit our street? It's going to hit our door. It's going to hit my family. And it doesn't always have to be touching the plant. And Cedric really nailed it, because it doesn't have to be touching the plant. There's an ecosystem in cannabis called the Ancillary Cannabis Business Market. That is an opportunity for social equity, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses to be able to deliver a service that you are good at, that you already know that the industry is going to need. And that's why we have to stay like eagle focused on the fact that this is an industry that's not going anywhere. My Black and brown community, I know we have some folks that you may say, I don't want it. It's not going anywhere. And there is some medical efficacy of this industry that we do have to reckon with. And that's why we're having this conversation today.
Yes, 100%. Cedric, I'd love for you to respond and add on to that, and also, talk about what it means for us to understand the state of social equity.
I really honestly cannot put a finer point on it than Raj just did. But I mean, listen, that's it. That's what it is, right? I mean, you have people who are locked up today who, if they have access to the news, or if they talk to their family and friends, come to the realization that it's folks out here who are literally making millions of dollars and having the opportunity to create generational wealth while they are still locked up for something that we have now not only decided is appropriate and okay, but we've also decided, basically who we want to benefit from it. I mean, it just is what it is. I'll say it again: how you write your cannabis policy tells me who you want to participate. What it is, and then I'll drill in on a couple different things here. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately, and that we've been trying to do some work around, is just going to the social justice element of this all. And I always, when I think of this, I like to think of the study that Los Angeles commissioned when they were making their social equity program, and how powerful that study is. And every time I read it, I just think to myself how important the concept that they came up with is on the front end. Now, I know people feel a lot of different ways about a lot of different people's programs, but I want to talk about the social equity analysis that Los Angeles did. So what Los Angeles has done is figured out a way to them to decide which entire communities were adversely impacted by the war on drugs. And the way they did it was it's like a 4 or 5 step process. They first identified the disparities. They mapped the arrest hotspots. They mapped low-income populations with the realization that the adverse effects of prohibition will likely affect your income. And then they just did this big overlay. And I think the ball that a lot of us may have missed is, and what we all should realize is, like, they didn't just determine what pool of people are going to be able to get licenses. They actually told you places in a Venn diagram that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. This entire community's prospects were marginalized. So as we talk about, these marketplaces and funding and where it goes, and, to piggyback on what Raj said, we got to make sure that these dollars also hit our streets and enhance the opportunities that we have. But you know what, like, to even take it a step further, I would say that if you were to do this same analysis, whether or not you have a cannabis marketplace, you should you can still do this exercise, determine which of these communities were most disproportionately impacted. And whether you got cannabis dollars coming in or not, you should begin to think about how you can use your resources as they exist to benefit these communities anyway. And to answer your question on the social equity part, I was reading, it was a paper that was done, I can't remember the names, but it was a student and professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. And I know, social equity is going to mean something different to Los Angeles than it's going to mean to Compton, then it's going to mean to San Francisco, then it's going to mean to, and then you take it state by state, because some states have tried to wrangle it without the local government perspective. But one thing that stuck out to me in that paper was how they define social equity. And I'm just going to read a little bit of what they said. It says, social equity is the active commitment to fairness, justice, and equality in the formulation of public policy, distribution of public services, implementation of public policy, and management of all institutions serving the public directly or by contract. Public administrators, including all persons involved in public governance, should seek to prevent and reduce inequality and injustice based on significant social characteristics. And the thing that you realize is, equity and inequity and justice and fairness or injustice or lack of fairness is not something that just permeates discussions as they relate to cannabis, but it permeates a lot of the public policy areas that affect our everyday lives. And I think that one thing that we could all stand to benefit from is to look at the parallels between, housing inequities and cannabis, and transportation inequities and cannabis policies, and what we really could do to fix it. Because, you hear a lot of people will say, like, the way these policies are written, if we're not in the door day one, the race is already started. And then they try, that, like, this is just, it's crazy to me. You're not even in the state, the race is going. Like, if you think about us after the first day, the race is going. They already got, they figured out the supply chain, they have customers. So if we, back channel it, year 2, year 3, we finally get you into the door. Not only are you having a fight, but you have having a fight way harder than you would have if you had gotten in the first place. So this is very, very nuanced conversation, and that I'll just stop right there.
Well, I think you made such a great point, especially when it comes to jumping into the race. And by that point, the rules have been changed 3 or 4 different times, right? And so, Roz, I would love for you to speak to how to be an effective advocate for more Black and Indigenous people of color entrepreneurs in the space. And not even necessarily like how we need to be more effective, but how can the industry be more effective and be a more effective advocate? And what do these BIPOC entrepreneurs need when it comes to entering into this cannabis space?
Well, I want to piggyback on something that Cedric said really quick too. It is a shame that we have policy that has been put in place that did not recognize social equity, did not recognize diversity or inclusion. And those are policies that, from the federal government perspective, when it comes to contracting, we've had these contracting type of set-asides through the federal government for years and years and years. So even policies like that are already in place at the federal level that the industry could have adopted early on, didn't happen. And so when you're in a race, and if you're running a marathon and you are trying to be competitive, if you have someone that starts that marathon and they're at mile marker 10 and you're just getting started at mile marker 0, there is a very high likelihood that not only are they going to beat you, but they're going to beat you by a landslide. They're going to win that prize. And so a lot of times we're coming in and we're looking at some opportunities. The medical programs throughout the country, I will tell you, there are some that are anemic at best. And the medical marijuana program reform really can focus on social equity. And I say that by saying that when Cedric talked about when he talked about those hot spots and that Venn diagram, those policed areas or what have you, there's another layer I want you to put on top of it. If you were to put over on top medically underserved or medically underserved populated areas and throw that on top of that, you will see that 9 times out of 10, there is going to be some synergistic areas where you're going to see overlap on top of overlap on top of overlap. My estimation from a policy perspective is that we got to start looking at the programs that are already in place. Let's reform them, but let's reform them with a social equity slant. Let's call them a medical social equity program reform that allows us to reform medical, but also get the social equity partners and applicants into the fold. No, do I not? Does that mean that you only service a medically underserved populated area? No, but it's my way of trying to figure out how do we rewrite or how do we play catch up from the policy that's already put in place. Your question about the industry has something that's so critical, and Cedric alluded to this with his organization, Weed Maps, and shout out to Weed Maps and their folks over there, because they have been really strong partners with our organization, and not only from just like what you need, but they walk and they talk. And that's where it is. You have to, from the top down, you have to create a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Have a real-time conversation we're not asking you to go and try to sugarcoat what you're doing. Tell the honest truth, and then figure out how do you create opportunities to make progress. Progress doesn't happen overnight, but if you see, we ain't dumb. We're very smart people. We're smart as a community. We're smart as individuals. We're smart as advocates. And so if you are a multi-state operator, if you're an operator in this place, we're not asking for perfection. We're just asking for honesty and for transparency and to be a good partner, a collaborator. If you make cannabis, you're not a community organizer. So find a community organizer who can organize with you to do the things on the social justice side. Put your resources in. Create volunteer opportunities within your organization. Make sure that people inside your organization look like the community that you're servicing. Don't culture vulture. Don't try to use our culture and our beautiful Black and brown skin and our music and everything that we do. Don't try to appropriate it just to create sales. Be a good partner. And I can go on for days, but that's like some of the really key things that I look at and I focus on.
Yes, 100%. I hear that. And yes, definitely shout out to Weed Maps and all the work that y'all are doing. And I think that's a perfect, segue. Cedric, how do we create, these effective strategies and build on what Roz was talking about in terms of the benefits that it can have in our communities? And shout out to you, Roz.
Every time I listen to Roz, I just want to say ditto and then let you ask another question so I can just keep learning, because everything you say is spot on and just like blowing my mind. I couldn't agree more. And even this conversation is really reshaping the way that I think about certain things. But I want to, there's an interesting connection between one of the points that you just made that I want to pick up on and how it relates to what we're doing internally. And it's, you talked about refining policy or creating new policies in the place of existing policies that we've seen have failed. And, I just want to say, like, the public policy making process it's not like you set it and forget it. The world is evolving, everything is changing. Sometimes you make mistakes that you have unintended consequences from, and sometimes you might have written a policy and just, probably didn't think through it enough to see what the consequences may be. But either way, like, there's a reason why, certain things have to be reauthorized, or, there's a cycle where, a bill will sunset and it has to get reintroduced again. It's because the world is changing and we're all learning, right? So it's a reason that there's an amendment. There's a reason there's an amendment process. And I think that the overall goal from a public policy perspective is to, just like Roz was saying, evaluate all of these programs that have been created, figure out how to make them better and work on making them better. But also, as new ones are coming down the pipeline, we need to make sure that we're applying all the lessons learned, whether they be right or wrong, from marketplaces that have existed in the past, until we get closer and closer and closer and closer to a policy that's one that we can say, like, okay, it's not a whole bunch of unintended consequences here. Our people were able to benefit from it. We think this is a good model. And then hopefully states that haven't adopted, or as the federal government moves towards whatever form of legalization, that closer to perfect policy is what they use as the basis for what they do. And then we just keep building and building and building and taking that model and then going back and implementing it into the marketplaces that already exist. So very, very, very important. And then I think that, what we do internally at Weed Maps, the first thing, and boy, has it been a learning process. The first thing that we did was went out into the community. We talked to folks. We were in place, we went to Illinois, we went up to the Bay Area, we talked to elected officials all over the United States. We try and be pretty active in everybody's public policy making processes everywhere. And the idea was for us to take a step back and figure out what's going on and how we can truly help, right? And along the way, you learn a number of things, but, you know, another nod to something that Ross said, you don't want to be seen as co-opting a movement. You don't want to sit in your office at your whiteboard and say, this is everything that's wrong with cannabis policy and cannabis marketplaces as we see it now, and we're going to do all. That's not it. It's people out here who have been doing this work for a long, long time, and they're super smart, and they're really, really good at it, and they're really, really effective. And I think that, you know, one of the ways that my viewpoint changed, and one of the things that we really strive to do is to identify organizations who are doing the good work for righteous reasons and figure out how to give them a platform or leverage our platform to even make it bigger, right? So it's not just, it's the difference between, in my mind, CSR and corporate social advocacy, right? So CSR is, you know, at a very basic and just, you know, slanted way to look at it is like, it is my responsibility as a corporation to make sure that we give this organization this amount of money and this organization this amount of money. And oh, something happened in the world, we need to make sure we give this organization this money. Corporate social advocacy is to understand how those organizations' policy perspective overlap with your policy perspective, and then to use your opportunities when you get in front of elected officials and when you get in front of regulators and people who are decision makers, and, you know, be able to sing off of the same sheet of music. What are you asking for? It's a difference between you being corporate socially responsible and you being a corporate social advocate. A corporate social advocate is not just, you know, this is what we're going to do. We're going to throw money into the community. A corporate social advocate is a person who, when it's on the line and you're going into that room or you're testifying or you're talking to the elected official, you're making sure you're asking for the things that you say you care about, if you really care about them. So Teal, you know, and Weed Maps Teal is two things. It's not really a program, right? Like if you were to look at the programmatic aspects of it, you would know, and I know you both are well aware, if you have a social equity license, and you were to reach out to Weed Maps at socialequity@weedmaps.com, you can take advantage of our services for free for you. And the reason that we did that was because we all know and understand the lack of capital or access to capital is one of the biggest barriers to being able to enter the industry. So the way we visualized it was, okay, if I'm a business owner and I have a spreadsheet of expenses, then which expenses can we as a business tick off to help lessen that burden? And the one way that we thought of was the one that is native to us. So when I think about these programs and what businesses can do, I think to myself, like, you first start with what you're good at. You know, you're in business and you make money because you provide some sort of valuable service. If you didn't, you wouldn't be in business. So consider offering the services that create value for your clients to social equity businesses at reduced or free charges, because they have a hard time getting access to capital. It just is what it is. But Teal, you know, Together for Equity and Equity, Access, and Legalization is really a mindset. It's the way we think about things. But, you know, Weed Maps is a big company. It has a number of departments that create value in different ways for the company. And what we try to do is figure out how we can lend that value to organizations. And I know that you guys are well aware, like, our help to you is not just, hey, we're going to sponsor at this level. Our help to you is, okay, you need to build a website, you're working on a newsletter, you got a program coming down the pipeline, or you getting ready to make an ask. Is there some kind of way that we can make the same ask with our ask, just so we singing off of the same page of music? It's really a mindset. As I in the government relations department go through my day in evaluating policies, I'm thinking of equity, I'm thinking of access, I'm thinking of justice, I'm thinking of legalization, and it permeates all of my work products. And that frame of mind and what we have created has spread into other areas of the company as well. So it's not just GR that's thinking about this, it's the marketing team that's thinking about this, and it's the revenue team that's thinking about it, and it's the finance team that's thinking about it as well. So, you know, when it comes to what a company can do, one is to, identify individuals who are doing a good work, learn how you can support and not co-opt something that somebody's already doing very effectively. And two is to think about what you do best and how you create your value, and then share that value with people who have social equity licenses, who need the help, who don't have the finances.
I love that you said of all of those things.
And Rue, I think it's critical the partnership that we have to work together, and the opportunity of working with the Weed Maps and other, you know, large size companies, but also just shout out to Minority Cannabis Business Association for the work that's being done over there, Rue and the team, especially from a policy standpoint. We would be remiss if we did not recognize, but also validate the fact that if we are so much stronger together, and if we really show and amplify our ability to work together, to learn from one another, to share best practices, to be able to then go to the big corporations. Because what you're not going to do is you're not going to split and have us pitted against another Black-centric community organization. There has been people in the cannabis community, I will tell you this, from the operators and some of the media companies when I first came in, that basically were trying to say, well, okay, we see what you're doing, it's the same thing, so we'll just wait and see who rises to the top, and then that's who we're going to support. No, you're not going to pit us against one another, because we have to be so locked together on this and working together and working with companies like Weedmap to then be able to say, okay, now how do we go and change the dynamics of what's happening from the federal level to state by state? So kudos to both of you guys. Definitely strong partners with us in our organization with M4MM.
Thank you both for saying that. And I feel like I love so much, Cedric, what you said about singing off the same sheet of music, because it just makes me think about when we were in children's choir and they said, everyone put your voices together and we make one big noise, right? Which is,
but when you look at it, he's not only talking about singing off the same music, but he's putting some skin in the game. The difference between corporate social advocacy and responsibility is, okay, we've done our little part. We feel like we've done the responsible thing. Advocacy is when you go and put not only what your interests are and what's going to win for your organization on the line, but you're able to advocate for something else that may not totally even transgress and be a part of the things that you're focused on. But because you have, what happens in the cannabis industry is that some of these operators and the ones that are well funded, they have relationships and they have access. And relationships and access can take you so much further sometimes than just money. And if I could be able to use access sometimes and relationships to help me get policy move forward, we would have a more equitable and fair industry. And so, it's that advocacy, you're putting skin in the game that's so key and so important to recognize.
100%. I love this conversation. I feel like we are currently shaping the landscape of what is an ideal industry for Black and Indigenous people of color in the space. We're winding down our time, and I could listen to you both, honestly, just please start a podcast. But I know, Roz, that you've been doing, well, we'll do plugs at the end, because I know you do your Facebook thing, which I love as well. But I would love for you both to just take 30 seconds to talk about the direction of cannabis in 2021. I know that's not a long time and there's a lot to go into that, but I think your forecast is going to be really important to the map that we all can follow throughout the year. So Cedric, I'd love for you to, take 30 seconds to talk about that, and then we'll go to you, Roz.
I would just say, with everything that happened in November, and some really conservative states implementing some super liberal programs, not just programs, but some super liberal programs, I think in 2021, we're going to see a number of states that we thought, cannabis has started to buck politics, right? Is what has happened. And then November was like the cornerstone moment for that, right? So we're about to start to see some marketplaces open up that I don't even know if, we're really on people's radar. And because of the politics of a lot of these states, it's going to be so important that people are mobilizing and banding together, and advocacy groups are doing their due diligence and educating our people, because these opportunities are going to come. They're going to come fast and furious. The snowball is rolling. It has gotten huge. And if we don't get our feet in the doors soon, then I feel like it's just going to be more of what we saw happen in other states, right? We'll be an afterthought. We'll look at this 2 years from now, realize that only 3% of the industry is, are people of color, and then we'll be trying to fix it. So the more proactive we can be, I think the better off we'll be. I'm hopeful. I've seen, federal politics and understand that we're going to have some new conversations springing up around cannabis. I think that there will be some movement there. I don't know exactly how much movement it'll be, but I am happy to see that in the releases that I have seen, the equity, fairness, and justice are hopefully going to permeate those pieces of legislation. So for 2021, and my personal planning and Weedmap's planning, and what we all should be doing is making sure that when it's our turn to have our interactions with these elected officials on these pieces of legislation, we're also making sure that we're asking for equitable and just and sustainable marketplaces.
Thank you. Roz.
I would
That's
say
2021.
2021, but I'm gonna go a little further than 2021 and mark my words on this. I graduated from school with a BS in chemistry, and this was in 1992. I'm about to date myself, so shout out to 92. But I knew coming out of school that I wasn't gonna use chemistry, but I wanted to get into healthcare. And I just saw the writing on the wall. Healthcare and cannabis and wellness is where it's gonna be. When you look at legalization at the federal level, I think any type of opening, any type of opportunity is going to have a strong medical slant to it. It's not going to support the adult use market. Higher taxes, you're going to see, you may see legalization, but being able to have a more profitable business or being able to create opportunity, it's going to be on the medical side. One, if you have a medical background, if you're an educator, if you're a healthcare practitioner, if you are a scientist, if you are a social worker, if you do analysis, behavioral health, anything that correlates that with the plant, and if you can figure out where you can create a fit, I think will do yourself justice outside of just looking at this opportunity from a business, from a plant touching operator, but from an ancillary position, the medical side of this industry and how it's going to play out. That's where you want to start looking at. That's what you want to figure out. You can literally, we're going to see pharma at some point in time come into this industry. Imagine if you already have yourself set up to be able to do business with those folks that are going to come in and actually see lots of mergers and acquisitions. But imagine if you could really have that strong medical wellness conversation, be able to provide services that's around that area, how from an economic perspective, you can create opportunity for yourself and for your family. So I haven't been wrong, I'm telling you.
I 100% believe you. And you said, mark my words. So that's how I know I believe you. Listen, this conversation has been so incredible. And I already follow the both of your work, but I'm looking forward to following what you're doing throughout the rest of this year and beyond. And really looking forward to seeing these forecasts come true. So where can we find you, Cedric? What's the best place for us to find and follow the work? And Roz, same question to you.
Cedric Haynes on LinkedIn, C Haynes at weedmaps.com. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you. And Roz, and please talk about what your Facebook, all of that.
Yeah. So listen, I do a show every Friday, 1 o'clock. We're going live 1 o'clock today on YouTube, Canna Talk with Roz, CANNA Talk with Roz. It's all one word, WITHROZ. You can find it on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook as well as on Instagram. And of course, I would be remiss, please follow Minorities for Medical Marijuana, M4MM United, M4MM United. You can find us, our website is m4mmunited.org. We're on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. So thank you so much.
Thank you both so much to Cedric Hines of Weed Maps and Roz McCarthy of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Thank you for tuning in to Green Enterprise, information, education, and empowerment conversation presented by Weed Maps. My name is Rue Johnson of the Minority Cannabis Business Association, and this has been an incredible conversation. We hope that it allows our communities to continue to rise. Thank you all so much.